It should count down now. Okay, hi everyone. You are listening to Nick Tofalos, the health detective. And today I am absolutely delighted, finally, after a few ups and downs and blips, to get Daniel Trevor on. Daniel has written this remarkably superb book, Unholy Trinity, How Carbs, Sugars, and Oils are Making Us Fat, Sick, and Addicted. And how to escape their grip, of course, most critically. And Daniel, it really chimed with me when I listened to you being interviewed by somebody else. What you were saying, it hit so many of the things I do in my practice life with patients. But what I thought was great is because you're not a medic and because your background is quite different, you explain it so beautifully for lay people, shall we say. So anyone who's interested, get the book for starters, because it's superb. It's easy to understand. It's also entertaining. It's a very enjoyable read. But before we get into it all, Daniel, tell me something. When you were a kid, when you were growing up, what did you want to be when you were growing up?
Oh my God. Well, first of all, thank you, Nick, Mr. Health Detective. That's very flattering. I'm going to hire you as my PR agent. Hey, you got to get this guy's book. But anyway, yeah. So I'm basically just a lower class street kid from Philly, and for you in the UK, Philly is Philadelphia. Yeah, and I had from a rough neighborhood and all that kind of thing. So I am still a little rough around the edges because, there's this saying, you can take the kid out of Philly, but you can't take the Philly out of the kid. So excuse me if I'm a little, like I said, rough around the edges. But the thing is that, I was fortunate early on to learn how to study well. Not that I was ever a superb grade A student, but if I was interested in something, I could conquer it. I learned how to conquer dictionaries. And because, everyday people will go, you'll read something or you'll hear something and they'll go, okay, what is that? And if you don't understand that word in that paragraph, your eyes are going to get to the bottom of the page. You're not going to understand what you just read and you're going to be blank. So you got to go back up and go, okay, so I got this. So what is this? What is catheter? What is cardiovascular or whatever the word is? Clear it up. And these days we have these things. We can say, hey, Siri, what's the definition of the word catheter? And then she gives it to you, right? So it can be a painstaking project, but the more you do it, the less you have to do it. Yeah. Your vocabulary goes out the roof, and so does your IQ. Yeah. So I was able to learn that early on with some teachers that I had. And so that's what happened as I was growing up. And because I'm not a doctor or a scientist, and I tell the reader early in the book, I said, look, I know you're probably thinking, without formal university medical degrees and organic chemistry and all that, why the hell should I trust you? I say, hey, don't. My book, just think of me as a friendly relay point of the best of what 21st century science has to offer for your health and wellness, and fix yourself. I did. You can too. My book has more scientific references and citations than any other health and wellness book in existence. Most of them, if they have any at all, they'll have 200 or 300. Mine has 1,227. So again, none of it's Daniel's opinion. This is all, I use this, much smarter people than me and experienced people, doctors and scientists and surgeons and so forth and researchers discovered all this information, and it's all available online. Because what happened to me was this, Nick. I had a heart attack and I almost died.
What does it feel
and
like?
And I thought it was Mr. Healthy, because I would get, I got, raving reviews from my doctors each year. Oh yeah, you're fine. And then I took the deep dive and found that they don't do the tests, the proper tests that you need to find out what's going on inside. For example, here's a shocking statistic. You may have read about this one. Just a few years ago, there was a large study, and this was out of Johns Hopkins, major medical university on the East Coast of the United States. And they found that 74% of doctors, now we're talking general practitioners, family physicians, internists, and cardiologists, 74% do not know how to properly diagnose and test for prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. It's like, what? Are you kidding me? What they do is most doctors, they'll test fasting blood glucose and A1C. And even the American Diabetes Association will tell you, hey, you're going to miss a lot of people. If you just do those two, you're going to miss a lot of people because so many people, including me, can test normal for fasting blood glucose and A1C and still be a raging type 2 diabetic. And that was me.
Wow.
And the reason why it's so, they don't do this other test, which I'll tell you about in a minute. And the reason why that's so important to detect, because having some degree of a diabetic physiology, whether it's prediabetes or full type 2 diabetes, is the source root cause of all these other major diseases. Your heart attacks, your strokes, your Alzheimer's, PCOS, cancers, amputations, blindness. It just, the list goes on and on. That's why I have labeled it the gateway disease. Because once you get there, and you know you're there when you're overweight. That's the first sign. I happen to be one of the 1% of the population that can be on the slim side and still be a raging type 2 diabetic. And the test that they don't do is called the OGTT with insulin, oral glucose tolerance test with insulin. And doctors don't order it. But that's the one you have to, I explain what it is in the book and how, that kind of thing. And these days, you can order your labs online without needing a doctor's prescription.
Yeah.
Because sometimes what will happen is, let's say you hear about a test and you take it to your doc, you say, hey, doc, I'd like to get this test or this one over here. You give him 2 or 3 and he'll go, oh, you don't need that. You don't need that. And the only reason he's saying that is because he doesn't know what it is and wouldn't know how to diagnose, wouldn't know how to read it or interpret it anyway. It's like, and the last thing doctors, MDs want to get from their patients is homework. They don't want homework from their patients because a lot of them will have this little coffee cup or a sign on the wall and it says something like, don't confuse your Google search with my medical degree. So if you've got one of those guys, you can be in trouble. So anyway, you can order them online without needing a doctor's prescription. You have to pay out of pocket, of course, if they won't do it. And so that kind of thing. That's the long answer to your short question.
Yeah, so the doctors, it is an interesting thing. They like to be the holder of the knowledge, which is why they dress things up in a medical language. Look, here's the thing. You got to understand it. And listen, besides my book being a how-to book on how I've reversed 4 comorbidities, which I'll get into, it's also a bit of an expose on big food, big pharma, and big medicine. Now, having said that, I know there's beautiful, wonderful people in all 3 of those sectors, but especially the doctors. We have 24-hour heroes in our emergency rooms. They're setting the bones and suturing up the wounds and removing bullets and steering wheels from our chests. And, I love all of them. Even my older daughter, Chloe, works in the ER. I talk to her about this stuff all the time. But, when it comes to the nutrition and biochemistry of nutrition and so forth, and what these evolutionarily developed meat bodies that we have are used to eating for millennia, many millennia, they don't get any training in the medical schools for nutrition. Little to nothing. They might get like 12 hours in their whole 8 years or what, excuse me, whatever it is, but they don't get it. So I can't blame them. And a lot of doctors, they can't be the doctor that they signed up and they wanted to be when they first got into it. Because they don't look, we have to face this fact too. Medical schools are funded and underwritten by Big Pharma. Big Pharma wants them reaching for the prescription pad. They don't want them talking to their patient about, hey, so what's your diet like? What you get into the gym? Are you walking? But if you take your little dog Poochie to the vet, what's one of the first questions they ask? Hey, so what are you feeding little Poochie? Yeah. But when's the last time you heard any doctor ever ask you,
hey, so what's your diet like these days? Are you getting to the gym? It just doesn't happen because they're not trained that way. And plus, keep in mind that they are working for bosses who want them to keep the patients moving. The average in the United States, the average visit is like 7 minutes. So how much education can you give a patient about, their eating habits and that kind of thing? Because we've learned that genetics can load the gun, but it's your lifestyle that pulls the trigger or keeps the safety on.
Yeah.
Genetics loads the gun, but it's lifestyle. And it's mostly what you put in your mouth that pulls the trigger or doesn't.
Yeah. And it's that old adage about a healthy patient is a lost customer, unfortunately.
I have that in my book. I think it's chapter 8. Yeah, that is a business model for many. A cured patient is a lost customer.
Yeah.
It's really true. I mean, I gave this example. I was talking to Dr. Ken Berry and on his podcast, and I told him that there was this study out of it wasn't a study. It was Goldman Sachs, the international banker.
Yeah.
They had one of their analysts do a white paper. I forget the name of it, but it was for their biotech pharma companies. And it was about creating cures is not good for the bottom line. It's not good for the money. I mean, although it may be good for society, creating cures is not good for the shareholders. And the example that they gave was there was this a big pharma company, Gilead Sciences, and they had this blockbuster drug called Harvoni. And when it was first released, it was like about $12 billion or something like that, right? And within a couple of years, it descended by 75%, and it continued its descent after that. The reason why is because it produced 96 to 99% cure rate for hepatitis C.
Right.
And, so if anybody in the audience has hepatitis C or somebody, there's a cure for that. And you can get that. It's called Harvoni. And after that happened, Goldman Sachs yelled at them. They said, you shouldn't have done that. It's a cure. Yeah. That's not good for our bottom line, our shareholders. What they would rather have seen them do was come up with a pill you can take twice a day or an infusion once a week or once a month, that kind of thing. So it's an ongoing profit model.
Yeah.
But no, we can't have any cures, even though it's great for society. We got to drag it out and make sure that the profits are there. Listen, I'm sure there's wonderful people in that big pharma area too, but at the top with the vested interests, it just seems, I don't know. When you look at history, it just seems like when you get human beings near money, something takes place and just they either look wrong the other way or they participate like that.
Yeah. I was chatting to a guy who he was the commissioner for the National Health Service in the northwest of England. So he would commission new services and all kinds of initiatives. And he said to me, he always wanted to try and do the right thing. And for him, one of the right things, and it's a big right thing, was preventing type 2 diabetes. So he spent 20 years in the health service trying to bring together initiatives to stop people getting type 2 diabetes in the first place. And in 20 years, he never got any of initiatives out there because he had things like the surgeons who spent their days amputating diabetic feet and legs. They would lobby to prevent him getting his initiatives in because, of course, they felt threatened.
Of course.
It's insane.
It really is. And that's one of the long list. I should add that to the list of those things that when you have some degree of diabetic physiology, you start attracting those diseases of modernity. Yeah. And it all came about because of what happened in the 20th century with the introduction of the Unholy Trinity, as I call it, the carbs, the sugar, and the oils. Yeah. And because we didn't have these things ever in our diet before the 20th century. Well, we've had sugar and grains, but never in the concentrations and the amounts that we have today.
Yeah,
And
it's true.
it's just wild because here's another
Just give me
statistic.
1 second, Daniel, because it's all of a sudden
sure.
it's gone really dark in my room. The sun's just disappeared from the window. It's coming in beautifully, so I'm going to go and put the main lights on. Give me a sec.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Go right ahead.
And then there was light. Okay.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say with regard to the 20th century, I mean, check out this statistic. You may have seen this in my book too. In 1930, the obesity rate was 1%. In the United States, we are approaching 50% in under 100 years.
Yeah.
Never before in human history has a population this size gotten so fat and so sick so quickly. You got to say, what in the hell is happening? And when you pull the strings and you do the analysis, it's the introduction of the unholy trinity. For example, in 1900, people died of influenza, infectious diseases, influenza, tuberculosis, pneumonia, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the very first medically recorded heart attack didn't occur until 1912. And then the cancer wasn't even like a thing, as they call it, until the 30s. And now heart attacks, heart disease and cancer are our biggest killers, right?
Yeah.
And I go through in the first few chapters of the book, I go through the history of how did we get here? I mean, you also look at how we started the 19th century. Hershey's, the chocolate company, their first candy bar was introduced in 1900. What a way to break open a new century, right?
Wow.
And then came O. Henry and all the other candies and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then, we didn't have these, the amount of grains. I mean, grains, that's a whole other thing I can get into. It's a little bit more deeper, but we should still explore it. But with regard to the oils, the seed oil, the vegetable seed oils, what I'm talking about there is there are some good ones that you can eat safely that are like authentic olive oil and, coconut oil and avocado oil. But the other ones are deadly. The soybean oil, the safflower, sunflower, cottonseed oil, all those there's about 8 or 9. I have a whole chapter on that. They weren't even discovered until 1865 when and it came from cottonseed farming in the southern United States.
Yeah.
And it was considered a toxic waste. But, they used it in the Industrial Revolution in the late 1800s, early 1900s as machinery lubricant. And these two guys from Europe came over, William Proctor and James Gamble, Procter and Gamble.
Yeah.
And they came to Ohio and they saw a bucket of it and it looked like lard, what people cooked with. And they thought, hey, well, let's, feed it to people. We can make some money that way. And soon they created this product called Crisco and it started flying off the shelves in 1911. And it's just, and Crisco they didn't discover this until in the 1990s, has more trans fat in it than any other type of food or cooking aid. Yeah. And trans fat has been established to be the most harmful fat for the cardiovascular system that you can eat. And it was just insane. So, and Big Food, they put it in just about everything. It's in your chips and your crackers and your breads and your and all the heart healthy granolas, heart healthy air quotes coming at you, Yeah. And so it's just pretty wild. So that's why I covered a whole chapter on it, because those seed oils can contain these, TBHQ, and then there's another one, HNE, 4-hydroxynonenal, and these ingredients that can cause cancer and are also neurodegenerative and, causing Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, that kind of thing. But, there's no education on any of this. And that's why part of the reason why I wrote the book. And I realized early on, I thought, I need to write this for the average reader of health and wellness, like for my Uncle Joe or my cousin Joe or my cousin Bill. because I don't want to make it really complicated for them. I want to make it so that they can understand it, joke around here and there kind of thing, so they can understand that, hey, this book is written from the viewpoint of one of the victims of all this.
Yeah.
And who's fortunate enough to know how to learn how to study and read the studies and go through them and relay it in everyday fashion to a normal, regular, average person.
Yeah.
And I mean, not to say that these people are stupid. They're not. They're very intelligent. As long as you can read, you can handle it. And it's just like Einstein used to say, if you can't explain something complicated to a third grader, then you don't really know it yourself.
Yeah.
So I really took it upon myself to figure out what are they talking about here. And it took a long time. I mean, those extra citations, that was like an extra 150 hours right there. But anyway, so, I take the reader through the history of how we got here.
Yeah. Had you ever written a book before this?
No, this is my first. I mean, I've written, as a business person, entrepreneur, I've written reports and that kind of thing. And I was a financial advisor for a short time, and I'd write financial. So in other words, I'm used to explaining complicated information to people who don't know this information,
Yeah.
So anyway, like that.
So, and you almost became a statistic that couldn't speak, let's face it. Well, what is it like having a heart attack, first of all?
Well, it's not anything like you see in Hollywood or Hollywood movies or anything like that. It's not like, it's like this.
Right.
Check this out. I mean, all these diseases of modernity that I write in the book, and I'll tell you about the 4 comorbidities, that there's no signs or symptoms. There are no clouds before the storm. I thought, like most people, I'll get some symptoms. I'll go to the doctor, and he's got a white jacket. So that means he's going to be able to fix me, right?
Yeah.
It ain't that way at all, folks. I'm telling you, it's just not that way. You have to do blood testing and scans and have all of them in the book. In fact, I think you know by now that I reached out to Dr. Ford Brewer, who's an internationally acclaimed preventive medicine expert out of Johns Hopkins, because he's taught and trained thousands of doctors over the years at Johns Hopkins, and he's brilliant at all the testing. So I reached out to him and I said, would you write a chapter in my book that goes through what are the most important blood labs and scans that anybody can order online without needing their doctor's prescription, because the doctor may object or, whatever. They may have that cup that says, don't confuse your Google search with my medical degree.
Yeah.
And in it, that way they can find out themselves if they got something lurking that's ready to pounce, or they're just fine, or somewhere in between that needs attention. And so it's so important to do that. And like that. It's just, I had, to answer your question about I was expecting to have some symptoms, but then early one morning, and I talk about this in the introduction of my book, I started feeling a sensation in my throat area, kind of like what you might feel at the beginning of a cold or a flu, that kind of thing. But soon came these cold sweats, and it was a little scary. I was like, what is this? So I rushed over to Dr. Google to find out what's going on. Because, I know how to search for things and so on. And I came upon, I got lucky with the website, the medical websites that I found, and they were listing, I was going down their list of heart attack symptoms, and I was checking them off. No. And I get to this one, says cold sweats. Oh, man. And then they also said time is of the essence.
Yeah, for sure.
Because, listen to this stat, Nick. Most of the people who die from their very first heart attack, their very first symptom of having heart disease was their own death. And it's like, what? Are you kidding me? Everybody thinks there's going to be some, clouds before the storm, but it's not that way at all. So you have to test. And like Dr. Ford Brewer calls his chapter 22, don't guess, test. So what I did was immediately when I saw that, I was nearby. I was right across the street from one of the top heart hospitals in the United States. It was like, whoa.
Lucky,
I walked
man.
in there and I said, I don't know, I'm feeling weird. And they drew this they drew blood to check if it had troponin, which is a protein, at higher than normal levels. And I was, and also 12.8 EKG and that kind of thing. And soon came the diagnosis of an MI, myocardial infarction, which is the medical term for heart attack.
Yeah.
And then I quickly texted my two daughters, and they were, very at my side pretty soon. And so it was a shocker to me. And so, having studied technical data all my life, I decided to take a dive into the medical and nutrition sides to find out, how could this happen to me? And what I discovered absolutely blew my mind and infuriated me.
Yeah.
I think, oh my God, we've been lied to all this time. What they've been telling us to eat with this food pyramid for decades is killing us.
Yeah.
And that's the source root cause of all the overweight and the diabetics and the heart disease and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So there's another long answer to your short question.
They're good. Hey, but they're good answers. And so you've mentioned that you had 4 comorbidities. Were these completely unknown comorbidities that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
Well, let me go through them.
Yeah, please do.
I found out by doing this, what I mentioned earlier, the OGTT with insulin. I got that test. And although I had normal A1C and normal fasting blood glucose, my score was way over 200 after, I think it was the first or second hour. I can't remember what it was, but which tells you that you are a full-blown type 2 diabetic. And I didn't know it because there's no signs. You don't have any symptoms of any kind.
Yeah.
And that was the source root cause of my undiagnosed cardiovascular disease, which caused my heart attack. Right. And then I find out I had fatty liver disease. I had what's called NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Yeah.
And because I don't drink, no drugs, I'm already silly enough, as my daughters will surely attest. And so I don't use anything that's going to hurt me because, just before the heart attack, one of my doctors had said, "Hey, you're going to have to stop drinking." I said, "What do you mean? I don't drink."
Yeah.
And they didn't know what to tell me. I said, "Well, what?" So then I found myself, I had a thing called elevated GGT, gamma glutamyl transferase. It's a liver enzyme. And most doctors don't test that. If they test anything, they'll test the other liver enzymes like ALT, ASP, ALT, but they don't check the GGT. And that one is the most important one. And I'll tell you why. Here's the deal. Life insurance companies, they don't care they got to know who to reject and who to accept. It's just business to them. They're not so interested in medical science. They just want to know if they're just protecting the bottom line. And these life insurance actuaries are damn good at, analyzing statistics, right? I mean, that's why the insurance companies have been the most successful companies on the planet since the 1600s or something, when they had ships and they would have to insure them. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But so
I think they're running the show.
Could be. Anyway, so I had this elevated GGT, and what they found was, according to the life insurance companies, it is their number one predictor of all-cause mortality. Number one. Why don't the doctors know what the life insurance companies? And again, these guys are just crunching numbers. They're not so interested in, they don't, and with regard to LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol, and high total cholesterol, they don't even make it onto their mortality predictor lists. It's useless and irrelevant, which I go into the book because we've been sold a bill of goods there too.
Yeah.
So you got to really make sure you check this GGT because the gamma glutamyl transferase, because it can lead to all these other diseases, and like that. So that's the reason why we've
got you on type 2 diabetes. We've got you on a fatty liver, though you don't drink alcohol. All right. Carry on with this list of infamy.
Well, the last on the list, I had the type 2 diabetes, which was a result of the cardiovascular disease, and then the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and my osteoporosis.
Right.
Now, writing this book and doing all this research, I've been able to reverse all 4 of those comorbidities. And now I'm just, my labs look like somebody who's 22, who's fit and healthy. And I've reversed all of it.
I've seen your photographs. Oh, your photographs.
Yeah, well, somebody told wasn't going to do that in the book, but somebody said, "Hey, look, you're such a success story on what you've done with this. You got to put that in there." And it was like, so I have a lot in the book. I have a lot of graphs and charts and images and photos and that kind of thing. Not just of me, of my chapter 14, because people were asking me, what is it that you do on a daily basis and what worked for you? How did it turn you around? So I have a lot of images of my new physique, which is, I went from a heart attack to a six pack, and I never had one of those.
I've
before.
got to get this out. Come on.
Oh no, don't embarrass me. No.
Embarrass you? Holy smoke. There's nothing embarrassing. Look at this, everyone. Come on. Look at this.
Oh God.
Look at that.
Well, anyway, listen, I never had a six pack before. And and when I say six pack, I'm not talking about the professional bodybuilders. I'm just talking about the abdominal muscles that exist on any human that are covered by belly fat. Once you dissolve that with the simple things I have in the book, there they are.
Yeah.
You look like a fit and, healthy hunter-gatherer. Because they didn't have the Unholy Trinity, right?
No, they
didn't have any of this stuff. So anyway, there you go, like that. So my chapter 14 covers all of that, and I go into a lot of. So I was able to reverse all those 4, and I tell you how I did it in the book. And again, none of it's Daniel's opinion, and please, and also you can see that up on my website too. I have a few of those photos. It's danieltrevor.com, and for your viewers, they can go there and sign up, get on the mailing list, because once a week I'll send out something. But they also get a free preview of the book. And what that is, it's a PDF of the first 48 pages. That way they can check it out. And, hey, if it's for you, fine. If it's not, then, like that. And then they can go. It's also an audio book now, because I knew I had to do that. And so like that. DanielTrevor.com.
And when I showed my wife that picture, Daniel, her eyebrows raised. And then
I'm sorry about
that. She said, what's going on with his skin? Why is his skin so good? What does he do? What does he do? And I said, I think he has some kind of skin company. Is this true?
I have well, it's not it's for men and women. I have this small skincare company, which I don't put much attention on. I just have that on automatic. It's because I'm just mostly promoting the book, because that's the most important thing, your health.
Yeah.
How you look is another thing. You do want to present yourself well and have good skin and everything. But speaking of the good skin, and the ladies would really love this, my chapter 23 is called Maximizing Gut Health, because there's this thing called the gut skin axis that I have this formula, and it's not mine. I found it from these other brilliant doctors and researchers. It's called the L. reuteri, Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt. It's just got 3 ingredients, but oh my God, these geniuses at MIT did a whole breakdown of it, and they found out all these amazing benefits from it. And one of them is younger looking skin.
Wow.
It's just amazing. So anybody that's got any gut issues or skin issues or anything like that, or if you just want to improve your gut microbiome and that kind of thing, I eat it. You just need to eat a half a cup a day, and it's great for even if you're lactose intolerant, because what happens is you have to ferment it when you make it, because I give you the whole recipe and the instructions. And when you ferment it, you can just get what's called an instant pot or a yogurt maker. And when you follow the instructions, it creates all of these, what they call colony forming units, CFUs. And you can buy probiotics at the store, and, but they're usually in 10 billion, 50 billion. This, on your half cup, you get like 250 billion right there. Wow. And the fermentation changes it from being lactose into lactic acid. So you will not get any kind of, if you're lactose intolerant, you won't get any of those effects. So it's safe for that.
Really interesting. I mean, when I was training 25 years ago, my tutor, he was 96 years old and he's still working 5 days a week.
Whoa.
And Yeah, he was an amazing man, a complete inspiration. But he used to always talk about the gut, the gut, the gut. The gut is everything, it's the center of everything. And of course, the common one we know of is the gut-brain axis. Now,
Yes, that one
that's new,
too.
that's news to me, the gut-skin axis, though I can completely understand where that would go. Yeah, absolutely. Incredible.
Yeah, it's a very important. I mean, a lot of this research that is still blowing my mind. I'm like, what? There's so many benefits from it, and my biggest regret is not having discovered all this early on. I just turned 76. Oh, 36. Yeah, I wish. I'm 76, and I feel a lot younger than that. Let's just put it
Good.
that way. And because I have the energy.
Yeah.
And so on. And, because you have to be able to understand that, like you said earlier, a cured patient is a lost customer. And I hate to keep bringing that up, but you have to find out on your own because like one of my the people that I got some really good information from, Dr. William Davis. He's a cardiologist. He spent decades in the healthcare system. And I read his book. It's called Undoctored. Subtitle is Why Healthcare Has Failed You and How You Can Become Smarter Than Your Doctor.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant book. I recommend it. And he's got this one quote that I put in my introduction, and with proper attribution to him, of course. And he said, what was it? Hamburger contains no ham. There are no grapes or nuts in grape nuts, and health does not come from healthcare. So what?
It's true.
So I'm making the point that you have to take it upon yourself to find out, is my current doctor missing something? Because they missed 4 big things in me, and I had to find out and uncover the truth about my own health and uncover it myself. And so that's part of why I wrote the book as well, to share it with others. And, you don't make a lot of money. You don't get rich selling health books, even though it's an international bestseller now. I always thought when you have a bestseller, there's some Ferrari money, right? Not that I would buy a Ferrari, but it's not that way with health books. You get Ferrari money if you write some kind of fiction book, becomes very popular. And then if it turns into a movie, oh my God. I mean, then you get, look at Harry Potter, you get helicopter money then. Right?
You do.
So anyway, it's just it's a smaller audience. Not everybody is interested in improving themselves because, again, these are silent diseases and they don't know what's going on. That's why if I'll talk to a friend or family member and I start noticing their belly and this and that, and I find a proper moment where I say, hey, I would suggest getting some of these tests that I have in the books. And they always say, oh, yeah, but I'm not sick. I say, my retort, I wasn't sick either. Look what happened to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's go to, let's talk about cholesterol. Okay. So there is this interesting stuff about the people with high cholesterol. This always makes people's eyebrows raise, but there is this interesting understanding that they don't let out of the box, as it were, which is actually people with high cholesterol generally live longer lives. Is this true?
It is. People with high cholesterol live the longest. People with low cholesterol die much earlier and usually of some form of cancer. It's just all backwards. I cover that. I ripped that apart in chapter 5. I called that What You Urgently Need to Know About Cholesterol, because we have been, this is part of I think I cover it I started in chapter 1. See, I have this chart in the book that shows the degree of heart disease from 1900 to 1955. And it goes, this is 1900, 1955 up here. What happened in 1955 is President Eisenhower had a heart attack, and it was a big deal. And because a lot of men and women were dropping in the prime of their life and going, what's going on? It was a big scare. And there was this unethical but very influential researcher that came along by the name of Ansel Keys. And he had this idea that it was the meat and the butter and the cheese and all that would clog up the arteries. And it's not that way at all. He gave the impression to people which they latched onto, that it was kind of like a shower drain, right? Where you had the hair and the grease and the gook and the soap and it all clogs up. It's not that way at all. In fact, it's not even in the lumen where the blood flows. It's underneath the artery walls, right? So he had it all backwards. But people heard that and then they get fooled by it. And, unfortunately what happened was, President Eisenhower had this doctor, I think his name was Paul Dudley White. Yeah. And he was good friends with Ancel Keys. So they put him on a low fat diet. He soon developed type 2 diabetes because, when you go low fat, you have to compensate with something. So they put him on high carbs and high sugar. It's like, what? So he had type 2 diabetes, had more heart attacks, he had a stroke, and he eventually, unfortunately, died of intractable heart failure. And at the same time, there was this other researcher, a British physiologist named Dr. Yudkin, Yudkin, and his research was trying to draw the attention to all the proof that it was the sugar and the carbs that were causing all of this heart disease, right? Anyway, what happened was in 1961, this guy, Ancel Keys, appeared on Time magazine, which was a very big publication back then. And he was wearing a white jacket as though he was a doctor. He had a BA in economics. He had some kind of other degree in oceanography or something like that. And he had knew little or nothing about cardiology, but his idea of the clogged drain, it was kind of, people got the idea. It's kind of like Mark Twain. Mark Twain was this everyday kind of philosopher in the 1800s. And he had this brilliant saying, and he said, it's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled. It's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been, because once they get that idea in their mind, hey, oh no, the COV jab works. Oh no, of course. And it does, it totally stops transmission too.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh, and the masks work. It's like, then they find there's 14 studies showing the masks don't work because the pores of the cloth mask are so much bigger than the size of any virus. Yeah. That the virus, yours gets out and any in the environment gets back in. But anyway, I don't want to go off into a tangent over that. But yeah, so anyway, I give all this history. And what they found was later they had this thing called electron microscopy where they could snake up these teeny tiny cameras into the arteries and discover this thing called the glycocalyx. What is that? The glycocalyx acts as the first line of protection. It's the fuzz-like lining of the artery walls. And it acts as the first line of protection against what's called small, dense LDL particles. Now, I'm not going to get too sciencey on you here, even though I could. And those small particles can invade the artery wall, get stuck underneath, and build up the plaque. And what they discovered was smoking destroys the glycocalyx. Eisenhower was 3 packs a day. Everybody back then, it was like half the population was smoking. They smoked in restaurants and planes. Doctors smoked around their patients. It was insane. They didn't know any of that. So anyway, smoking did go down, but what they did was, because of Ancel Keys' research saying that it was the meat and butter and cheese, big food rushed in with all of these low fat foods and packaged foods and everything. But when you remove fat from things, it doesn't taste so good. So they had to put in sugar and a lot of carbohydrates and grains to make it palatable. And, that happened within 10 years. And so then you see another graph that I have in the book where they introduced the pyramid, the food pyramid. Yeah. And when that was introduced here, this is where the obesity rate wound up, or still is. It's like started here and it goes up on the introduction of the food pyramid. And oh my God, you can't talk people out of that. Again, it's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled.
It's that the food pyramid is so powerful that it's kind of presented to school children in school as a fact.
Oh my God, it's awful. They now came up with this. I cover this. I think it's in chapter 7, where they have this new thing called the food plate. And they have this whole list of foods, and they have And it shows you, I won't give you the whole breakdown, but Lucky Charms are healthier than meat, cheese, and butter. I mean, it's just backwards. In other words, meaning that they were at the bottom of the list, meaning they were bad for you. And you got Lucky Charms and 60 sugary, cereals that we're feeding our children. Oh my God, it's horrible at the top of the list.
It's criminal.
Like they have. And so the grains is a whole other problem. And I'll let you decide whether you want to get into
let's move on to that. In that, I know you mentioned this hidden away addictive ingredient in a lot of foods. And I think that links into the grains. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So we'll see here. Let me just get a little background. Again, images and that kind of I have a picture of a guy. Well, it's his skull from 100,000 years ago. And it's just his skull. And you see he has perfect teeth, right? And we didn't start eating grains. Anthropologists and bioarchaeologists tell us we didn't start eating grains and wheat and that kind of thing until like a mere 9,000 years ago or so. They found out that clever humans were able to figure out if they pulverized the seeds of these grains that they saw that the ruminant animals were eating, the cows and the whatever was around there. If they pulverize those seeds, because that's what they make wheat and grains from, the seeds, not the stalks and everything, and they pulverized it and they added water and heated it up a little bit, they made something like a porridge. And that allowed them to survive an extra day or week, month, that kind of thing. But their health and wellness took a serious toll. And after they started excavating bodies, after that $9,000 years ago, towards the present, missing teeth, tooth decay, all these new diseases were coming in, not as bad as the last 100 years and so quickly, but everything changed. The bone diameter and length, men shrunk 5 inches, women shrunk 3 inches. It was a disaster. And so moving forward, they probably weren't in widespread till maybe like a few thousand years ago, this wheat and, as they had modern ways of making it faster.
Yeah.
Big ag came along in the late 60s, early 70s, and they changed it all too. Instead of growing to shoulder height, with these fields and all that kind of thing, they had this thing called chemical mutagenesis and radiation mutagenesis, and it reduced it to 18 inches. They call it semi-dwarf wheat. So even though it's smaller, the seeds are bigger, and that's where they get a more bountiful crop. But what that does is it amps up this chemical called gliadin, Gliadin, gliadin.
Yeah.
And what does that do? Gliadin attaches to the opiate receptors of the brain, the same opiate receptors as heroin and morphine. It doesn't get you high or relieve pain or anything, but its expression is to make you crave more of the things that have wheat and grains in them, like your bread, pasta, cereal, biscuits, waffles, pancakes, chips, pretzels, rolls, pizza, tortillas, and on and on. Oh my God. And so you have this addiction, and that's why I call chapter 10, Are You a Wheat Addict? And it's just, I'm sorry to break it to people, but it's so ancestrally inconsistent with how these evolutionarily developed bodies developed over the millennia and many millennia, because anthropologists and bioarchaeologists told us that we have been apex predators eating meat from the minimum of from 2.6 to 4.5 million years. Our diet consisted of what we could catch, kill, and eat, nose to tail, and what we might occasionally pick off a tree or a vine, that kind of thing, but only when the berries were in season, right? So it was mostly a high fat and protein, very low carbohydrate diet.
Yeah. So I was chatting about this to a friend of mine who lives in Iceland, and he was telling me how, they used to come number 2 in the world for longevity in Iceland, closely behind Japan. And all they ate in Iceland was meat and fish, because the clue is in the name. Nothing grows there. It's made of bloody ice, that land. and volcanoes. And so they had this long-lived population who ate meat and fish and a few berries in the season, and that was it.
Right.
And then they decided to adopt a healthy diet, which was growing vegetables in greenhouses and importing the flour and the grains and the cereals. And the moment they started that, they dropped out of the longevity stakes. They've gone like a stone, dropped.
I hear you. It's like the Inuit in Alaska. Their diet is mostly blubber, and they have low heart disease, just like your guys that you just talked about. Low to no heart disease.
Yeah.
And the very few hunter-gatherer groups that are around the world, it's the same thing. In these little pockets, you might find hunter-gatherers, very high protein and fat, very low carbohydrates, no heart disease.
Yeah.
So, it's very ancestral, like, that kind of thing. So it's just, everything is just so weird. And I was just talking about it with the guy at the gym, and we were talking, I have the whole chapter on exercise, chapter 9. And I was discussing with him, I was asking him why he spends so much time on the treadmill. Oh, well, everybody knows you got to get your cardio in, right? I said, oh, okay, So I was looking into that, and it wound up being in the book. When you and I were out hunting and gathering, I don't know, 3,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, or whenever.
Yeah.
When do we ever have a need for running and jogging through the woods or the forest or the jungle for an hour? It's like, what? There was never any need for jogging. It was sprinting, because we sprinted after the animals that we were chasing, or we were running away from them so that we could prevent ourselves from being lunch, right? So it was very natural for us to sprint and also HIIT, HIIT, high intensity interval training. That's when you and 5 other guys are, struggling and working out with the mastodon or whatever it is you're trying to bring down to have food for the village or your tribe. And so those are the best ones. And some with resistance training, because we had to lift heavy things, logs and stones and that kind of thing, in order to make our shelter. So that's why resistance training. And by the way, for anybody over 40, they had a big study, and I cover all this in chapter 9. Let's see, I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, it's in chapter 9. And they wanted the question was, what is the best exercise for people over 40? Is it cardio and aerobics, or is it resistance training with the weights and the machines and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
And they compared it against, they had the 2 groups, and they paired it against all of the 5 metabolic markers and more. Your HDL, triglycerides, A1C, and so on. And I even have their chart that they use in the study in the book. And they discovered for people over 40, resistance training was way more beneficial than getting on the stationary bikes. I see these guys at the gym. They're sitting in the chair watching a monitor, and they're going on these stationary bikes. I'm going, oh, man, and they should be pushing the machines or, the resistance training, because that's what's best for the body. Because what happens is, as we age, there's a natural tendency as we age, all these humanoid bodies, for the insulin resistance and the diabetic physiology to go up, right? So you want to be able to have control over that. There's a thing that they discovered was called muscle glucose uptake. I have a whole section on that too, same in there. And the muscle glucose uptake is where, when you're doing an exercise that has resistance, it pulls the glucose, which can do a lot of damage to your arteries, out of the arteries and into the muscle, where it can be used as energy. So it's brilliant. So the resistance training, you want to get that muscle glucose uptake, whether you're working at your legs or your arms or whatever it is, you got to get that going on. So anyway, wanted to touch on that a little bit too for all of our viewers that are over 40.
That'll help balance your general sort of blood sugar levels, won't it?
Yes,
Clearly.
Absolutely. And I've got to send this to you, Nick. I just discovered this recently. There was a study that just came out last year. They're talking about red light from the sun, or you can buy these red light machines. And they were looking at, it was a British researcher. I think his name was Glenn Jeffrey. Yes.
Yeah, I sent it you, Daniel.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, my God. Yeah. Thank you so much. I meant to tell you, thank you for that. And I took a dive into that, and they discovered that it's, as you know, with a red light from the sun. And what they did was, the way they did the study was they had two groups, and they measured it against the oral glucose tolerance test, which tells you the amount of, glucose you got going on.
Yeah.
And it was amazing the amount of benefit, because they just did it for 15 minutes with the red light on about a 1 square foot area on their back.
Right.
For 15 minutes. And then it would measure 45 minutes later their blood glucose. What they called it was significantly discernible, big differences between the two groups. And so it was the benefit was just so unbelievably good. So
yeah,
I'm looking for one online right now to get, and it's, I do try to get in the sun at least 15 minutes a day anyway. Yeah. And where you are, there's a little less of it. So you might want to get one of these red lights, but yeah, anyway, thank you for turning me on to that.
Well, I think I was chatting to a guy who's an expert in sunlight and energy, LED lighting and so on, from New Jersey, actually. And he was telling me, actually, while sunlight is important, daylight, full stop. So even if it's a cloudy day, you're still getting the effects. In fact, to some degree, it's better because you can stay out in it for longer.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So truly, it's all
wonderful.
About get outside. Go figure.
Look, anything we can do to lower the blood glucose, because that's the killer. That's why you see so many ads on your cable TV or wherever about lowering my blood glucose and that kind of thing, because I get into that very early on in the book. I think at the second page of chapter 1, I start talking about the fact that you must know about the two most fundamental players in the processing of the food that you put in your mouth. And that's glucose, also known as blood sugar, and insulin. You eat something and your blood glucose goes up. And then the pancreas senses that and it secretes some insulin to bring it down and keep it in a safe range. And that's a normal, healthy process that goes on. But when you're eating foods that constantly keep your blood sugar up and your insulin way up like that too, hour after hour, day after day, week after week, you develop what's called hyperinsulinemia or insulin resistance. Hyperinsulinemia, that's just a fancy term. Hyper, too much insulin. Emia means in the blood. Yeah. Hyperinsulinemia, too much insulin in the blood. And remember, everybody, insulin is the fat storage hormone. So if your insulin is high, you're going to be putting on the pounds. So you want to do the things that are going to lower your insulin, and that is by lowering it's like a stimulus response kind of thing. You get your blood glucose going up, and the insulin's right there with you. And so you have to figure that out and because that leads to the inflammation, and that leads to the diabetic physiology, and then all of the silent diseases that come from having a diabetic physiology. That's why it's so important. I cover that. That's why I tell people, I said, look, if anything, make sure you really understand the first 8 or 9 pages of chapter 1, because that'll take you through the rest of the book. Yeah.
I mean, in the end, that's back to your metabolic health, full stop, isn't it?
Yes.
If your body is not metabolically flexible, and that's what you're getting with type 2 diabetes, that's where all the trouble comes from.
Yes. Yes, you're right. You're so correct on that.
And
I see you're in your office there with all the charts, and you got the Mr. Skeleton back there.
Sure. That's Frank.
Frank. Hey, Frank. Yeah. Oh my God. That's wild.
He's got a Sherlock Holmes hat that's hanging around his neck, which right? When my wife became a detective, I got her a Sherlock Holmes hat and a magnifying glass. Get this, she's never taken them to work. How can you not? She's a detective.
She is a detective? You mean like homicide and that kind of thing?
All of that.
Whoa. That's a lot to confront.
That is a lot to confront. Yeah, she kind of confronts people like Frank every now and then.
Yeah, well, look, it's like all I want to do is live a long life. And, you know, the thing is I want you to not be like me and get the right testing so you know what's going on.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I was discussing with cardiologist Dr. Philip Ovadia on his podcast. And he's, you know, this cardiologist, heart surgeon. He's done over 3,200 heart surgeries. And, you know, he's brilliant. And I was talking about with him, I said, you know, because when you have a heart attack, you have permanent damage to your heart. And nobody knows how much or to what degree or how many years or months it's going to chop off the end of your lifespan. That's unknown. So I decided, okay, when I found that out, I thought, well, what can I do? What can I be cause over? And I thought, well, I'm going to get into the most superior metabolic health as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And maybe that might offset it. I don't know. There's no studies on this, but that's my theory. That way I'll be at least energetic and healthy for the rest of my life and see if that helps at all. So anyway, that's what I did because, you know, you just want to avoid all of these things. So again, none of the book is Daniel's opinion. It's just, look, this is what I find out. Don't be like me. Find out what's going on inside you with the proper testing, and there you go.
So tell me this, Daniel, because it's something I try to stress to my patients and anyone who will listen. You becoming metabolically healthy, okay, being healthy, full stop. Is it boring being healthy? Because I don't think it is, but you tell me, does it mean you have to live a boring life?
No, not at all. Not at all. No, look.
It's not hard work.
Look, the reason why I call it a part of a how-to book is because I had to find out these healthy but delicious substitutes for all the things that I was addicted to. I was addicted to everything that a lot of your viewers may be addicted to right now, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, what do I got to do? And so YouTube is a treasure trove of healthy recipes that you can replace this with that and that kind of thing. Because, you know, you got to make it palatable for yourself so that you can get through it. You got to keep an eye on your blood tests and that kind of thing. Because what happened was early on after I had the heart attack, I found out about all these tests and I ordered a lot of them to find out the good, the bad, and the ugly. I knew I was going to have a bad report card, but I wanted to have a benchmark where I could measure my progress, you know, 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, and so on. And, you know, so that was my benchmark so I could measure. And then I was doing all these things. First, I found keto, which is low carb. You see, when I say low carb, that's a spectrum of diets. The first one I found was keto. Keto is maybe 80 to 90% animal products. So it's high fat, protein, very low carbohydrates, right? And then you have what's called ketovore, and then you have carnivore, and then you have the lion diet. And let me explain those. The ketovore is just adding a little more of the animal products in it. And carnivore is just animal products, whether it's butter, meat, cheese, eggs, salmon, you know, that kind of thing. That's carnivore. Most people mistakenly think that you're only eating meat. No, that's what they call the lion diet. I didn't know this either. So this is all news to me. So the lion diet, and many are using that too. A lot of people are curing diseases with that. The aforementioned Dr. Philip Ovadia, he's a carnivore. He's a, cardiothoracic surgeon. Yeah. And anyway, so I found keto, which was low carb, and I, was really thriving on that once I found all of the delicious substitutes that I could have for all the things that I was addicted to, because those eventually your taste buds and your palate will change. I promise you. Yeah. And once you get past that, it is an amazing freedom once you get there, where anybody can put anything in front of you to tempt you. And you're just, no, I'm good. I remember what I was back then. I'm happy with my low blood sugar and my insulin resistance being gone, and not having heart disease and not having, diabetes and so on. So, anyway, that's where I started. Now I'm carnivore. I'm all the way over to, I just eat, whether it's eggs, beef, butter, cheese, salmon, that kind of thing. And I do intermittent fasting, which I cover in chapter 8, which is all about, look, when you and I were hunter-gatherers way back when, we were lucky to eat once a day. Yeah. Now people are eating 3 meals a day plus 3 or 4 snacks a day. And it's like, oh man. So I tell people, look, take it easy. Don't try to do everything at once. The first thing you want to do is eliminate the snacks one by one. So how do I get, and then the way you get from point A to point B, in other words, how do I get from lunch to dinner without having a snack? Every afternoon, I'm used to going to the office kitchen and having something with the girls or with the guys.
Yeah.
And the way you do it is on your lunch, you have to eat something that's high fat and high protein because it's very satiating.
Yeah.
Here's the thing to remember, and I have this several places in the book in big bold letters in the middle of the page. Carbs do not satisfy appetite. They stimulate it.
Yeah.
Anybody knows once you eat a big plate of pasta and that kind of thing, you're hungry in an hour or you just keep eating. You have 2 or 3 slices of pizza and you can't stop.
It's
because
true.
The carbs do not satisfy appetite. They stimulate it. So when you eat something that has high fat and protein, you're going to last through much easier.
Yeah, definitely. And we're sort of dancing around heart disease, type 2 diabetes here, but you also touch upon, well, you don't touch upon, you go into some detail about hormones, and you talk to the gentlemen and you talk to the women. And so let's do a little bit on that. Let's talk about, for men, let's talk about hormones, testosterone, I guess you can flag up. Talk us through a little bit about that for men.
Well, for men, the number one thing on the list, I think I have a section in my chapter 14 because I talk about that. 10 testosterone tips. Number one is you don't want low cholesterol because cholesterol is a precursor to testosterone. You can't make testosterone without having enough cholesterol.
Yeah.
It's just a fact. It's just any, first year biomed student will tell you that. And so you can't do that. And all these hormones, you just can't develop them as well.
Yeah.
And so you have to maintain your testosterone levels. And, when you go on a low fat diet, you're going to destroy your testosterone. And so you really want to make sure. And that's what happened in the last 50 or 60 years. Men's testosterone started going down like that. Fertility rates are going way down. That's why in the 90s, Viagra went from, this like accidental discovery that they made in the lab to this overnight, multi-billion-dollar a year drug, right? Because of, and we didn't need that before. And so, you really got to make sure you don't have, and look, it's hard to say this, especially the doctors are really against that too, because you got to remember the big pharma, their statins, they want you on the statin because that's the biggest cash cow that has ever come along in big pharma history. I mean, they want you on it for the rest of your life. And that's why I have in chapter 18, it's all on statins. And I have this study in there I got from Dr. Robert Lustig, and there was a big study, like meta-analyses that involved 92,135 patients, just to take a little sideline onto the statins.
Sure.
The statins lower your testosterone too.
Yeah.
They wanted to find out, because patients will ask you, okay, so how much longer will I live if I take a statin every day for the rest of my life, which is what your doctor and certainly Big Pharma want you to do, right? So there are 2 groups, and they found that those in the group taking statins for primary prevention, in other words, no heart attack yet, they're just taking, your doctor has it on it because he says your cholesterol is too high or some kind of nonsense, right? That has no science backing behind it that I debunk in the book. And he's got you on that for that. Those in that group, they lived a mere 3 days longer than those in the other group not taking a statin, right? And those in the group taking a statin for secondary prevention, in other words, they already had a heart attack.
Yeah.
They lived a big 4 days longer. So I asked my readers in the book, I say, you still want to put up with the nasty side effects from taking statins? Because for some people, they can be pretty damn nasty. You know, aches and pains and road rage and psychoses and all that. You drop at least 20 or 30 IQ points. And that's because statins reduce the cholesterol, which the brain needs lots of.
Yeah. It's insane. It's insane.
Oh,
What gets me is that this statin thing and the cholesterol thing is so powerful. It's like mass hypnosis, because I'll speak to my patients and I'll say to them, they'll tell me they're on a statin, and I immediately begin to tell them, not quite as articulate as you've put it, but nevertheless, I tell them about statins. I think sometimes I'm a bit blunt with my patients, but they're it's like watching the shutters come down on a shop window. Do not compute. Do not compute. Do not. The doctor has told me, and that's it. The doctor has told me I have
he's got
to
a white
be
jacket.
on these. Yeah, it's a
Hey, it's just like Mark Twain.
Powerful. Yeah,
It's just Mark Twain again. It's easy to fool people than to convince
yeah,
them they have been fooled.
yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
so
Mark
look,
Twain
it's
was a
just,
big fan of osteopaths. Actually, he was a big
oh,
fan
is that
of
right?
osteopaths.
No
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah.
Well, there
Yeah.
you go, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah,
then
so people have to wake up to
testosterone.
that.
Yeah, statins play merry hell with all kinds of things, and testosterone is a biggie for men. And you've got a chapter about PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome.
Oh yeah, polycystic ovarian system. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
talk me through a
Syndrome.
little bit of that and where you're
Well,
going with it.
I saw so many of the ladies. That's why I'll say in the chapter, I say, pardon me, gentlemen, while I have a talk with the ladies.
Yeah,
But you can stick around in case you know somebody, because I go into this and it turned out to be right in the line with the cause of it, polycystic ovarian syndrome, with the theme of the book. And that's getting away from this hyperinsulinemia, insulin resistant diabetic physiology, which goes up naturally as we age. And even more so if you're eating the Unholy Trinity, right?
yeah,
And so there was I think it was 2003, there was the Rotterdam, what do they call it? The Rotterdam study or conference, where they established these three things that tell if you have polycystic ovarian syndrome. And, most of the time, the effect has to do with fertility, where, despairing couples just can't get it together, and they resort to IVF and so on. Not anything wrong with that. But if what they discovered was, and I have this in this study that was, and I even have the graph where it shows the hyperinsulinemia, which pushes down the sex hormone binding globulin, which then allows the testosterone to raise. And when in women, when testosterone goes up, you get a deeper voice. They start, hirsutism is called, that's with bearded women and that kind of thing. And it resists, it causes these cysts to occur on the, and that causes follicular arrest. These follicles are what eventually turn into the egg, which then allows for ovulation and so forth. And so it's all from hyperinsulinemia, from these diabetic physiology. And they prove that you can reverse PCOS in 12 weeks on a strict keto diet. I mean, I have all this in chapter 16, and it was like, all this stuff blew my mind too, because I had no reason to. But then I had someone close to me that had it, and I thought, well, I'm Mr. Research, so let me jump into that, see what I can find out. And then I found this out, and it was like it just fell right into what I was already looking at with the rest of the book.
So it all goes back to the very start of your book, really. All of that.
It's true. That's why I have a graph on page 3. It has hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance in the center, and it's got all these lines out to the side, heart disease, high blood pressure, PCOS, Alzheimer's, strokes, and that's where it all starts.
Yeah. I wonder how many doctors tell their patients with PCOS, how many say, look, let's start with a 12-week diet plan. Let's begin with that. I wonder how many doctors do that.
Oh my God. Look, it's the same thing. Look, they would rather, what they do is they'll put them on drugs. And Big Pharma doesn't want them talking to them about their nutrition or change of diet. They want them to continue on the drugs, right?
Yeah.
So like that. So anyway, if I can be of any assistance with anybody, I've done my job. And that's where we are.
Well, here's an interesting one for you, because I was doing writing an article for a local magazine about arthritis and food, and whether food can help arthritis, and quite simply, yes, it can. But I was doing my research, and you go to Google, and the first page of Google, in fact, probably the first 3, 4, 5 pages of Google has pretty much been bought up by big corporations and their own message. And the whole of the first page was from the biggest arthritis charity in the world, which is called arthritis.org. And I went into it, and it had a page on arthritis and food. And in there, it had an award-winning American nutritionist. I can't remember her name. And it had her organization next there. And she basically said, there are anecdotes about food and arthritis, but we have no evidence. Basically, food cannot help your arthritis. The way forward is modern pharmaceuticals, right? So I went to have a look at her organization and where she came from. And it turns out, who are they funded by? PepsiCo and a company that make anti-inflammatory drugs for arthritis.
Oh,
and there you go. But the tragedy is, so many people will look at that information, think, well, an award-winning nutritionist says this, and that's the end of their journey of discovery.
That reminds me of that. We have a show over here in the United States called 60 Minutes. I don't know if it gets aired over where you are, but they had this gal on. She was a medical doctor, researcher, and she was on talking about Ozempic.
Oh,
and she was saying how, it's not your fault if you're fat and overweight. It's just you have to take this drug, and even, you can put 10-year-olds on them, and you just take it for the rest of your life. Yeah. And then you look into her, and she works for Novo Nordisk, who creates Ozempic, and she is paid handsomely through them. It's like there's so many vested interests that it's just such a shame that we have to protect ourselves from the false data and fake science that's foisted on the populations and the doctors for way too many decades. Yeah. It's just even in the end of chapter 7, towards the end, I have this. There was a study, Nina Teicholz. I don't know if you know who she is, but she wrote this groundbreaking book in 2014. It was the book of the year. It spawned many studies, and it was called The Big Fat Surprise: Why Butter, Meat, and Cheese Belong in a Healthy Diet. Yeah. Blockbuster, still to this day. And she's one of the ones that gave me a wonderful endorsement for the book too, that you'll find on the back cover and inside front cover. And she's allowed me to use a couple of graphs from her that she developed in the book too. And of course, I give her proper attribution throughout. And she and her group called Nutrition Coalition, they did this study. Let me tell you about this U.S. dietary guidelines. Every 5 years, they update them. We're now in the 2020 to 2025, and what they found, they looked into the members of the U.S. dietary guidelines that put them together, and they found that 95%, in other words, 19 out of 20 of them, were taking financial backing from big food and big pharma. Kellogg, General Mills, Mead Johnson, all the, it was just amazing. So you've got these people with vested interests that are saying that it's okay to eat, all these awful foods that are bad for you. So it's just, because still to this day, they just won't acknowledge all of the evidence that is very easily available to anyone about low carb. And how it is evolutionarily consistent of how we ate for millions of years. Yeah. So anyway, the corruption is just out the roof. And it's so sad because most people, they don't have the time or the energy. They got their family, they're working, this and that. They don't have the time to, they'll hear some person who's got a white jacket and he's the minister of health or something or other. And they'll go, oh, well, he said it because he's got the white jacket. And, so. And again, there are a lot of doctors and so forth that are not following that. And those are the ones that have endorsed my book and that I've done a lot of interviews with that you've seen and that kind of thing. So,
I
by the way, I have
hope.
all of
There is hope
Well,
because people like you and I are now having these conversations, and we can spread this information all over the place because of the modern communication can be so fast. So there is some hope amongst all of this because more and more people are beginning to turn to this, I think.
Yeah, well, my mission was just to make it as easy and as palatable and easily received to the reader and listener as possible, because I've narrated the book and it's available on audiobook if that's easier for people. It's available paperback, hardcover, Kindle, and audiobook. Yeah. And, I wanted to make it very discernible. And if people went to danieltrevor.com, at the top of the page, it'll say video podcasts. And I think it's the third one down. It's called Cholesterol Lies, in case anybody wants to look at. And that is, there's this guy named Kerry Mann, and he interviewed, it's about 10 or 12 doctors, heart surgeons, orthopedic surgeons, this and that, and me. So, I'm in there too, because I'm an expert in this area, so to speak.
Yeah.
Or at least he considered me that. And it's short clips of each person. And he really did a great job editing, and it tells about all these people, how what they were taught in medical school was completely wrong. And gee, I wonder why.
Yeah.
It's because the medical schools are funded by Big Pharma, and they want them pushing the drugs. So anyway,
this is all good. Now, one thing that I came across as I was enjoying your book, we're not going to go into detail on this one, but just because of the way the world is, I'm afraid. But you even talk about, and this because you live in California, right?
That's right. Yeah, Southern California.
And that's a Democratic state, as in
the
Democratic Party.
Yeah, they're insane over here.
So you mentioned
the brain cells just don't, it's Mark Twain again. It's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled. But anyway, go right ahead with your. So what are you going to ask me that I covered?
Well, so you cover the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the UN, and climate. And this is a gem of a chapter that delighted me in the middle of it all. Unfortunately, that gem of a chapter, if you start speaking that aloud on some platforms, gets you removed from the platform. It's the crazy world we live in now. But it struck me, wow, this is a man who lives in California who should be, forgive me for saying this, but a fruitcake Democrat. And you're not.
No. Listen, I'm just a common sense person that knows how to study well and connect the dots correctly. Because some people just, they believe certain individuals because they have good vibes.
Yeah.
I'd rather have somebody that doesn't have any vibes.
Yeah.
But their statistics and production and their history prove that they can do it. They can do what they're saying they do. Whereas you're going by vibes and, I like the smile, and it's.
Yeah, I know.
I don't like his tie. I don't like,
it's terrible.
There's all these superficial things. But the world, I'll be careful with what we say, because we don't want the overlords of the World Economic Forum coming down on us, and the World Health Organization and YouTube, because YouTube follows the WHO.
Big time.
So, it's, I cover that. You're talking about chapter 12, which is called Eat the Right Meat and Help the Planet.
That's the one. Hooray.
Well, I mean, it's hard to go into all of it because, as you know, I cover so much, but it basically results in getting into regenerative agriculture, because these crazy people, they want us fat, sick, and addicted.
Yeah.
Right? They want us overfed, undernourished, over-psych drug, undereducated, the list goes on, right? And their stated ideal global population is 500,000. So they have a lot of weeding of the ant farm to take place.
I thought it was 500 million.
Oh, yeah, that's what did I say?
500,000.
Yeah, no, it's,
no. 500 million. Yeah.
500 million. Okay. So
Yeah, that's
maybe I got
okay.
it wrong. I forget. Look, I have so many stats and figures. Sometimes they collide with each other
I
in my
cannot
brain.
believe
So,
how quickly you lift these up and know the chapters and know where it's from. It's remarkable.
well, anyway, I don't know. Thank you for that. But anyway, so it's about regenerative farming because they're believing that the cow farts are having something to do with the climate and all that.
Yeah.
And it's just not
Yeah.
that way at all. It's just, again, it's the Mark Twain thing. And they convince people with all these goofy ideas.
Yeah.
And then there's these other scientists that say, wait, no, it's not that way at all. And I show the proof and all like that. Regenerative farming is where the waste, let's say of the waste of the farm, like the cow poop and your feces and so forth, that gets into the soil and that creates carbon drawdown, what draws down carbon out of the environment, and that waste is used as energy in other parts of the. I cover all that in chapter 12 there.
Yeah.
Other parts of the farm. So. It's really, that's the way things are going now. There's more and more farms that are going organic and growing the beef, because a lot of the beef that you want they're called CAFOs, CAFO. What is it called? Concentrated animal farming operations.
Operations. Yeah.
Yeah. CAFOs. And that's where they have these poor animals. They have them in stalls where they can't even turn around.
Yeah.
And they're just fed. They're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week till they're deaf. And they're just feeding them all this feed that has glyphosate and GMOs and hormones and all kinds of things that are just really deadly to not only to them eventually, but it fattens them up, and hormones and so forth, but also it's not good for people. So that's why you have a lot of regenerative farms popping up around the United States, and I'm sure elsewhere on the planet too, that don't do it that way. And World Economic Forum doesn't want it that way.
I can step out of my front door and look over to the fields across, and there's beef and dairy cattle that are all regeneratively farmed. We get all our meat most of our meat from a farm about 10-minute drive away that's all organic, unmedicated. So it is that kind of raw milk, all that's all starting to happen, I'm pleased to say.
Fantastic. So I ask in the book, I say, why is it that the most